Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live here in Legacy Arena. The vestibule, the foyer, the common area, the concourse, whatever you'd call this, that's where I am. The court is gone. I don't know what they do here other than the Birmingham Squadron, whatever that might be. But the court's gone, so I had to find a place here in Legacy Arena somewhere to do my rap video following Purdue's 87-69 loss to number 2 Auburn here at the Battle in Birmingham, the cleverly named Battle in Birmingham. It was in Birmingham. It was not so much of a battle. Thank you to the Purdue Club Hotel for your support, as always. I could not find your location in Birmingham or surrounding communities, nowhere near the 2 Buc-ee's I passed on the way down here. So that will be on your to-do list for 2026. Make sure you get a presence in Alabama. Anyway, so Purdue loses 87-69. The final score was laundered thoroughly by an 11-0 run to close the game. So again, like the Penn State game, like the Texas A&M game, look at the final score, but then look at how the final score got to where the final score wound up. It was, in the prior 2 cases, a little more deceptive than reality. This was way more deceptive than reality. Purdue trailed by as many as 33 points, which is undoubtedly a shock to the system, to most of you who have come to expect Purdue to, be this awesome machine that's been winning game after game after game after game the last couple of years, that's been in 1-seed contention, NCAA championship contention, as was the case last season, and now has run into some hard times here, to quote Southern or dusty roads. Purdue has lost, 4 or 5 now? It is very important, and this will segue me into my first point, to frame that against the schedule. Purdue has lost 4 or 5 games against what is one of the toughest schedules in college basketball, what might be every bit as tough as last year's. I never thought I would see a non-conference schedule as difficult as what Purdue ran the table against last season. But when you look at this schedule, this was the second time this season Purdue played the number 2 team in the country. This was their 5th game against a ranked opponent. And, Purdue ended up 2-3 in those games. They got a couple of good wins. But they obviously took some lumps too, which is normal for these teams that schedule up. And when I say schedule up, I don't necessarily mean that in terms of scheduling better than they are. Purdue has been this level of schedule-type team here the last few years. But this year's team is not perfect, and that has been exposed here in these 4 losses when you count the Penn State game. It just goes to, I don't know. I had words in my head and they're gone. I do have something written down here, and that's sort of a little bit of the differences in building teams between Purdue reaching this elite level and some of the teams that are pretty consistently at this elite level. Is that Purdue's team last year and Purdue's team the year before that and this year's team were years in the making. And when I say years in the making, I don't just mean those teams getting to campus, playing a couple years together and developing together, developing as individuals, but also together. But I mean the recruiting process to lasting months, if not years, on each of those guys. Whereas a lot of these teams that Purdue has historically struggled with, these super athletic, grown-ass men teams that just take the finished product and they cobble them together and they just have the same team every year. Well, Purdue doesn't operate that way. Auburn operates that way. Auburn can go out and get the same team every year because they can go out and get who they want in recruiting by any means necessary every single year. And so can the Gonzagas, and so can the Kansases, and so can the North Carolinas, to a lesser extent the Villanovas, certainly the Louisvilles, certainly the Tennessees. And those are the teams Purdue has been beating the last few years. They were beating them because Purdue had a distinct physical advantage in every one of those games. And that was number 15. I'm not talking about Drew Brees. I'm talking about Zach Edey. And, I guess it's kind of time to pay the piper here to a certain extent. Not that you necessarily things have to come back on you, but Purdue now is in a position where these more physical teams, Purdue does not have a playing field leveler against these teams. Purdue does not have an advantage in one single individual against every single opponent it plays against. And thus, some of the imperfections in this team, imperfections and flaws are two different things. I'm using the term imperfections for the time being because there are very few flawless teams. Purdue's team last year was as close as you're ever going to see, probably, at Purdue at least. And Purdue's taken some lumps here against these more physically mature, older teams that can kind of rough them up the way Zach Edey was roughing up everybody in a different sort of way the last few years. Purdue couldn't just go out last spring and go get another Zach Edey, nor did it try. Auburn next year will go out and get another Janai Broom one way or another. They will find that player, and they will have that guy every single year. Kansas will have the same guys every single year. It's kind of what I'm getting at here is Purdue got into a strata where you have to maintain it every single year, no matter how you go about your business, and you have to get that level of team in a matter of months, whereas Purdue built something over a course of years that was bound to hit a bump in the road here or there, and you're seeing that bump in the road right now. Purdue is not a very physical team, certainly not a team that's going to out-physical a lot of people at this level of the game. They will out-physical a lot of people on their schedule, but not this schedule, not this part of the schedule, not this 5-ranked team type of schedule. They lack enough ball handlers to really have the same complete dynamic they did last year with Lance Jones. So Purdue's issues, shortcomings, imperfections have kind of been laid bare during this stretch here where you've lost 4 or 5 games. Really an unheard of losing streak here, or losing span for Purdue based on its modern recent results. But that it's sort of college basketball. It's just something Purdue had been insulated from. And now you've moved yourself up a weight class here in the game by what you did these past several seasons with all these All-America big men, all these physically dominant teams, with some of these elite guards you've had, and all these number 1 seeds you've either gotten or contended for, the Final Four you've gotten to, the Big Ten championships you've won. You moved up a weight class. And now sustaining that weight is something that this particular team, hasn't really done as effectively as a lot of other people would. You see the same teams every year, right? Duke, Kansas, North Carolina, Auburn's now in that mix. Alabama's on the cusp of being in that mix every single year. You see the same teams every year. Tennessee's right on the cusp of being in that mix. And Purdue is right now just a notch below it. The biggest point I can make here is Purdue is still really good. These last 5 games, 4 of which have been losses, have to be framed against the schedule and have to be framed against the time of year, and shouldn't distract from the fact that once things get out of this ranked team every single game away from your home court stretch, things are going to normalize. Purdue's still going to win a ton of games. They're still going to compete for a Big Ten title. They're still going to be a top 5 seed to the NCAA tournament. This would have been success. This is success by standards of 5, 6, 7 years ago. Now, after Purdue's been number 1 in the country 3 straight years prior to this one, it seems like the end of the world probably to people who might not be applying the proper context to all of this, but Purdue is still really good. They just have been made to look really bad here in a couple of these games against really high-end opponents, and their record's not going to look as good as what their team probably is. Now, the risk you run with this stuff is that you might be a really good team, but you overschedule, which I think Purdue has overscheduled in this one instance here this year. We'll get to that later. But you run the risk of taking all these losses, shaking your team's confidence, shaking your team's unity. I don't think that's going to be a problem for Purdue. I think they're wired better than that. They responded. A lot of these guys on this team responded to that loss, that 16 seed loss years back, by going to the Final Four and being the best team in the country, arguably, other than UConn, all season long. So I don't think that's really a landmine this team might step on, but it is something that can be a risk in situations like this when you schedule as ambitiously as Matt Painter schedules. You always schedule to the team you have. If you think you have the best team in the country, you go get the best schedule you can get, because you want to make sure you get that one seed, maybe that number one overall seed, but also you want to make sure that your team has been challenged to be the very best it can be. That is what Auburn has done. Auburn has the best resume in college basketball. They might be the best team in college basketball. They are really good. They are elite. Purdue was overmatched in this game. They were simply overmatched. That's the best way I can put it. This was not a team that they could compete with. And the way the first 4 minutes of this game played out, it looked like what ended up happening might happen. As soon as Janai Broome not only showed he was healthy, but he made that first three, and this place, of which nothing was neutral. This was absolutely positively 100% an Auburn home game. Purdue has advantages in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Nothing like what Auburn had here. Absolutely nothing. This was 100%, 99.5% Auburn fans. They were crazy. They were into it, and they affected this game. Now, Purdue's going to have to go play Big Ten road games, so this was probably a positive experience in that regard. But Purdue will not have the same advantage in Gainbridge Fieldhouse next year that Auburn had here. Purdue did not have that advantage against Texas A&M in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, and it will not have it next year against Auburn. Maybe that's the difference between the SEC fan mindset and the more modest, level-headed, sane Big Ten sort of fan mindset, accepting Michigan-Ohio State football. They're crazy. But anyway, the schedule. Again, you always schedule to the team you have, and Purdue was not going to have the same team it had when it was number one the last 3 years. At one point in the season, around this time of year, it was going to lose Auer-Ade, and I think if maybe Purdue had to do it all over again, perhaps they would have eased up a bit here. I don't know. You do this to sweet talk the computers to get that net ranking where it needs to be. As of this morning, Purdue is number 30-something in the net. That's not ideal. That's not great. You now have 4 losses. The hope you have to have now is that because of this, you're better off in March. You're better off at the end of February when you're competing, theoretically, presumably, expectedly, competing for a Big Ten championship. Possibility, too, you have played these styles of basketball now. You have seen four SEC teams, 3 of which defend at a really high level. You beat one in Ole Miss. You lost to Texas A&M in a close game. You lost to Auburn in a blowout. So now, when you get to the NCAA tournament and you have to play Tennessee again or somebody like that, if you're fortunate enough to get to a level where you can see Tennessee again, it's not a shock to the system. You've played Marquette too, so you've seen these styles of basketball that should make you better and better ready for anything when your season's literally on the line at the end of the year. So the biggest thing I can say from this game is just I still think Purdue's a really, really good team. They've just been made to look really, really bad, and their record might not make them look like a really, really good team at this point. and just keep the context of all this in mind. The schedule is a monster. The standard is higher, and when you combine those lenses to what's happening here, things look a lot worse than they are. I always like to say things are never as good as they seem, never as bad as they seem. And when Purdue was rolling through all these non-conference games the last couple of years, nothing was ever guaranteed from there on out. And now that things have normalized a little bit, being 8-4 right now after 12 games is not the end of the world. Purdue should beat Toledo. They'll be not 9-4 going back into Big Ten play. You'll be set up to build some momentum early in the Big Ten season, I think. And you're still, maybe the best team in the Big Ten. Certainly one of the best 2 or 3. Who the hell knows? I think Oregon's pretty good. I think UCLA is going to prove to be pretty good. They will lose road games because that's just what they've been dealt in this ridiculous corporation that the Big Ten has become. Outside of that, we'll kind of see about all these other teams. So that's why I got about the basketball game here from Birmingham while I sit here smelling like smoke from having 2 smoked turkey meals and 1 brisket meal today. Food's incredible down here. This is my last video before the holiday, so I always like to share a little heartwarming holiday message to all of you, whether it's Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever it might be. So just want to thank everybody, as always, for visiting goldenblack.com and being part of our community there, watching our videos, listening to our podcasts. We have a lot of platforms. We have a lot of balls in the air. And I stepped on a landmine last time I said that on one of these videos. But I just wanted to thank you. Without your support and your enthusiasm for not only what we cover, but for us, is just really, really humbling and makes it possible for us to do what we do for a living. I do, contrary to some minor gripes here and there, I do love my job. It is a lot of fun. I've been very lucky in my life on a lot of fronts, and I do really appreciate all of you, even though I might snap at some of you sometimes. I'm done taking online abuse. That is one decision I've made in my life in the last year. I'm done with it. So if I come at you when you write something on Twitter or you write something on our message boards, let me apologize in advance. Just understand you're dealing with enriched uranium here these days. I'm just done with the bullshit parts of the internet. So pardon my French. Anyway, I do really appreciate 99% of you. You might say I love you. I do. So just want to say thank you to everybody. I hope you have a great holiday. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. Again, a wonderful whichever holiday it is you subscribe to. I hope it is wonderful, it is safe, and it is relaxing and pleasant, because I am all for everything I communicate to you all here being pleasant. I say that when I just engaged in profanity, which was not very Christmas-like of me. So that's what I got. Thank you to everybody once again for everything on a variety of fronts, and thank you to the Purdue Club Hotel for your support. As always, we will be looking for that Athens, Alabama location right by the Buc-ee's, maybe in the Buc-ee's. There's plenty of room in there. This time a year from now, when I have to come to Tuscaloosa to see Purdue play at Alabama. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. And thank you for processing our materials, however it is you process our materials. And I will talk to you guys again after the holiday when Purdue plays Toledo, I guess, next weekend in its non-conference finale. Don't drink too much eggnog. If that's still a thing, I don't know. Anyway, thanks, everybody.